Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today to cover the subject of negotiation. This workshop is put on for you in a partnership really with Sacramento State Financial Wellness and with Sac State Career Center, where I work in the employer relations side of the center. I'd like to start this workshop with a quote. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. I know talking about fear at the front end of a negotiating workshop may not be so enticing, but I do hope that you will dive in with me today so that we can take a look at just all the reasons why you should not shy away from this subject and why it is so beneficial for you to learn and continue to develop this particular skill. So let's start. I'd like to go over briefly what we're going to cover during our time together today. Because the subject of negotiation is a rather complex subject, there's a lot of nuances, a lot of scenarios, and we have a brief time together. So I'm going to really just focus on some basics, starting out with some fundamentals, what I would consider the underpinnings of what's going on during this particular type of communication. And then we're going to step into some really clear processes that you can go through, that you can learn and practice, that will help set you up for successful negotiating, including how you respond at the point of an offer, how to prepare yourself for a negotiating meeting. We're going to talk a little bit about the dynamics and the psychology behind the negotiating conversation. We're going to also dive into some of the later steps of how you take a look at your own interests, skills, values, and align them with the opportunity. We're going to then put it all together into a nice, wonderful package so that you can enter a negotiating meeting feeling confident and ready. I'm also going to provide you with some resources and some next steps. So let's get started. I'd like to share with you just some ideas around negotiating that I think are very important, and I hope that you will hold on to these ideas while we're talking through the how-tos part of negotiating. First, negotiating is already part of our lives. I could ask you, if we were in the room together, how many of you feel like you have experience negotiating? And many of you would probably have said no, but if you take a look at the picture on the slide, I think you'll realize that we've been doing this for a while. I recognize that it is different for each of us. Everyone comes to the table with this subject with a different set of experiences and comfort level with the subject of negotiating, with the subject of money. It's influenced by all sorts of things, including our upbringing, our culture, our life experiences, and more. So from wherever you are starting, it might be a place where you feel good about it and you just want some tips and tricks, or maybe the concept of bringing this up is terrifying. Either way, there are some clear steps we can take. I want you to recognize and hold on to the idea that negotiating is always part of life, and it has always been there, that it is a normal and recognized part of doing business. Number two, negotiation is not a zero-sum game, meaning my gain does not equal their loss and vice versa. This is a very important piece, and we'll talk about this as we go further, but this is a very, very important underpinning, that we are working together and in a collaborative way with the person across the room from us when we negotiate. With that said, a negotiating meeting is a high-stakes conversation. What do I mean by that? These are conversations that have strong emotional content to them that we might not feel particularly comfortable entering. You've already been through a few of them when you're at the negotiating meeting, because in fact, you've been through a job interview, which also lines up as a high-stakes conversation. What are other high-stakes conversations? It could be you having to tell a loved one something they don't want to hear. It could be having to talk to a neighbor about how they might be infringing on your sound level in your apartment, or maybe it's a breakup. Either way, understanding yourself in the context of a high-stakes conversation is part of a skill set that you can learn and develop and work with. Next up, negotiating, as I mentioned, is a skill. It can be learned. You absolutely can do this. And I am a great testimony to this. One of the reasons I so enjoy and jump at the opportunity to facilitate this workshop is because throughout my life, I have learned many times over the hard way that I missed out on things because I wasn't comfortable negotiating. If I can do it, believe me, you can do it too. The key to all of this is a positive outcome. So preparation is really the most important part that will help to alleviate some of the stress of a high stakes conversation, some of the anxiety that comes around, I don't know how to do this. So we're going to get started and give you some really clear things that you can work on to prepare for this conversation. So I'm going to start out with resistance. I think it's important to bring this up because it's like the elephant in the room. Resistance is there. I appreciate so much that you're here with me now because that means you have broken through that resistance and you're really looking at the subject matter. But if you still do feel like, oh boy, I really don't want to deal with this, believe me, you are not alone. Some fun stats here. 7% of people who took a survey through Robert Half said they'd rather have a root canal than talk about money with their employer. 37% of people always negotiate their salaries. Notice that is not the majority. And 18% never do. And even worse, 44% of all the respondents claim to have never brought up the subject of a raise during their performance reviews. So I do get it. Negotiation is scary, but it is much scarier if you don't do it. And let me show you why. If you take a look at this picture here, the top, if you break the screen into top and bottom half, the top half represents what it might look like if you took a job at $17 an hour full-time at graduation and you didn't negotiate. Assuming that you stay there 5 years, and I did include in here a 3% cost of living, figuring that might keep you there for the 5 years, you're getting a little bump every year. But if you look at the difference, after 5 years, you are making $39,798. But let's look at the bottom half of the page. Let's say you get a job offer for the same $17 an hour, but during that negotiating meeting, you talk about the possibility of having a review at 6 months that could be tied to compensation. And at that 6 months, you have really knocked it out of the ballpark and they give you $1 an hour raise. This helps boost your confidence. And then at the end of the year, when you finally have your annual review, you're able to negotiate an additional dollar raise. So if you keep fast forwarding through this scenario and every year, year over year, you manage to negotiate a 5% increase in your salary. Now I have included here also that 3% cost of living increase that the first scenario covered. Instead of making $39,798, you are now making 5 years later, $51,149. So if you just do the math, you can see how small increments over time really do add up. But that's not the whole story. There's a lot more to be gained than just money through this process. If you take a look at this slide, you'll see all the different things that are influenced by your ability and your comfort level with negotiating with your employer. There are other things to be gained, and we're going to cover these quite a bit as we go along. But let's say you negotiate a certain work-life balance that allows you to have more time at home, or it allows you to have a healthier lifestyle. These can have long-ranging, lifelong impacts on your life and your health. There's also an important factor here in terms of how you position yourself and how you are viewed both by your colleagues and by your supervisors, so that as you enter an organization with that confidence and that skill set, they will see you in that light, and that can help you grow with an organization. And as you continue to position yourself and do better and make more money, of course, when another opportunity comes along, you're in that much better shape to negotiate the next step. So, on to that subject of zero-sum game. Why not just win? Isn't it the idea that I get in there and I have things that I want and need out of the situation and I'm going to ask for it? And they, on the other side, are in control of who gets what and when. So I am working somewhat in a push-pull with that employer. I'd like to throw that idea out the window, although there are some elements of push and pull in the conversation. Underneath it all, what is most important is that you can hang on to and think about the most common goal that you have shared. So if you think about it, at the point where you are negotiating a salary, you've been through a whole process already. They've already decided that they want to hire you. Yay. So with that said, as you enter a negotiation with someone for a job, recognize that at this point in time, you both want the same thing. because although you feel as if you have invested a great deal of time and energy in the process, so have they. So what you both want is for both of you to get hired. Simple, right? Both of you want not just the hiring to happen, but both of you want to have a good, successful, and positive employment experience. So hold on to that. It's the idea of when you're in conversation with someone, if you want them to hear you and you want to get along, it's better if you run alongside them going the same direction than if you run up against them. So holding on to this quote, the most important trip you may take in life is meeting people halfway. And one of the best ways to meet people halfway is to jump on board with them. Addressing the concept of navigating a high-stakes conversation, I just wanted to share a few things that you can work on here that will really help you manage yourself through the process. This is a very personal process because when we talk about high-stakes conversations, we're talking about emotions, we're talking about preconceived notions of ourselves, of our worth, and of the other person sitting across the table from you and how much power each of you has in that situation. So here are some basics that I think are very helpful. It's very important as you prepare and during a negotiating meeting to stay focused on the outcome. And by the outcome, I'm not talking about that dollar amount that you're hoping to get, but that outcome of coming with a shared win-win situation where both of you are going to walk away feeling good about the outcome. I'll explain a little bit more about what that looks like, but hold on to that as a concept. The other piece is empathy and humanity, really. Recognizing that although you have anxiety, so does the other person. They have their own, maybe anxiety isn't the right word, they have their own investment in the process. They have their own stresses and their own pressures coming from the business side. And at the end of the day, you're both just human beings. So the more genuine you are and the more empathetic and considerate of the person you are negotiating with, the easier it will be for you to communicate. A third piece is to know your stories, and we will go into detail with this. But if you really know yourself at this point, you've been through the interview process, and you've done all the work behind it, if you really master your stories, what you think is, it really tells the story of how you have moved through your life or the experiences or accomplishments you've had that make you well suited for this job. It will make it easier for you in this process. And of course, there's getting in touch with your feelings. Managing your emotions, staying focused on the positive is part of this, and it's individual for everyone. But recognizing, gee, this is what I do when I'm stressed. How can I help mitigate that? I'll use a simple example of maybe during the interview process, you have a tendency to fidget. So you decide you're going to sit on your hands during the interview so you don't fidget. That's a way of managing stress during an interview process. So think about what it is you do when you're stressed or when you're anxious about a high stakes meeting, and spend some time with yourself, getting comfortable with it's okay that you're going to feel a little extra energy during the interview process. That's normal. And knowing how you are going to work with yourself to get through the process in a positive way. And last, there's some really concrete tools that you can use in high stakes conversations. And I'll use an example that I just heard the other day. This particular workshop is being recorded at the mid-April stage of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I was listening to some recruiters talk about how they were going to have to call some of the new interns that they just hired and tell them that they were going to have to rescind the offers. And what I heard was them saying, I had a pre-written draft of what I was going to say. I had a script in essence, and having that script was really helpful for me. And this is common in the world of employment when someone has to terminate someone or when a difficult conversation has to happen, that you learn to be direct and specific. The same is true here. We're going to learn how to be direct and specific with our asks, and having it a little bit scripted is actually a good thing. So, we've been talking a lot about these underpinnings of negotiating. I'd like you to take a minute now to sit back and think about the fact that, wow, somebody just offered you a job. So close your eyes if you're sitting down and bask in it for a minute, because that's very, very exciting. This means a lot of important things that I want you to hang on to when you go back to negotiating with someone. And that is, You have done well. There's a lot of steps nowadays to getting someone to hire you. And obviously, to get to this point means that you have been a good fit for the position, that you have expressed your skills and your interests and your values well, that you have been professional, you've hit all the marks, and they have decided that you're it. So feel good about that. So let's imagine a scenario. You have gone on an interview and I feel like it's gone really well. And they said, we'll get back to you in a week. And a week goes by and you get a phone call and the other person on the line says, guess what? We've decided that we really want to hire you for the position. What do? Well, I know there's an urge to go, woohoo, let's say it's a job you've always wanted and you just can't even believe they called you back. I still want, no matter what, I want you to take a breath, and we're going to go through some reasons why I'm going to highly recommend that you not respond to a career or job offer on the spot. Yeah, you can be excited about it, but here's some reasons not to immediately give an answer. Even if you're really excited, know that it's really hard to take back a response once you've given one. And coming back later if you have questions is awkward at best. Before responding to an offer, consider a few things. Do you know everything you need to know about this offer? They might say on the phone, we want to hire you at $54,000 a year with full benefits. And you might think, wow, that's great. But what does full benefits actually mean? There's a lot of things involved with a benefits package, and maybe you don't know all about it. That's one point. Number two, how is this job decision going to impact me in my own life, as well as others that might be affected by my decision? Do you want to go home maybe and talk with someone about it first? Maybe there's family members that it impacts. Another point, what do I want to negotiate, if anything? Do I have a strategy for how to start a conversation if I'd like to ask for something different? Am I prepared to respond to a variety of different possible responses from the employer? I have a note here about best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It's a term you sometimes hear in negotiating. It's very important, if you are going to negotiate, to have thought through some of these scenarios and have some alternatives already planned. And lastly, negotiating is a normal and accepted part of the hiring process. And showing that to an employer is a good thing. It shows that you have a skill, that you care a lot about the job, that you have the ability to have a conversation and express what the ideal or the best fit is for you in terms of salary and benefits. Taking the time to do this will reflect well on you. So let's go through some nuts and bolts here. You got a job offer. Yay! First steps. When you're on the phone, if it's in an email, however you are told or communicated that someone wants to hire you, it's very, very important that you show appreciation for that. Even if you don't want the job, that appreciation is very important. If you are interested in the job, it's also very important to restate your interest. So someone calls you and say, we'd like to offer you the job. You say, oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited about this opportunity. Step one. Step two, though, is important for you at that time. Find out how are you going to get all the information you need to really understand the whole offer. Maybe you do know everything there is to know about it, which is great. I find in my experience that most of the time there's many details that a candidate doesn't know about. This is the time to ask how you can find out about these details. So you can say, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited. I'd love to find out a little bit more about the benefits package. Is there someone in your organization I can connect with, or a place that I can go to look for that information? That's number two. Number three is most important, is you're just going to ask for some time and then arrange a next meeting. And I'm introducing here a very important concept that we'll cover as we keep going, and that is the word ask. This is a collaborative process. Remember, we are working together toward a shared goal of you getting hired. But with that said, that humanity and that congeniality needs to come through all the way through the process. So you're not demanding that they give you time, you're asking. So if it's all right with you, you might say, I'd like to take some time and look at this offer. This is a very important decision for me. Would it be okay if we scheduled something later in the week? something like that. This gives you the opportunity to review the whole picture, including how this offer aligns with your values, goals, and interests, so you can decide if you want to accept the offer, and if you do want to negotiate, what items, if any, you want to talk about. So you've done step 1, 2, and 3. They said, great, we're happy to do that. Let's meet next Monday at 2 o'clock in my office. Great. It's Wednesday. You have 4 days. So now the work is on you. Step number 2, you're going to take a deeper dive and look really at what you're being offered. Hopefully you know a lot of this already, but if you haven't, you want to take the time to really look through those job duties, the range, the complexity, the demands, the environment. We work with a lot of government agencies here, so if you're working or looking in government, you'll probably have too much information on paper, but you still may not have any real idea of what a day in the life looks like. You're going to also take a look at qualifications, and this is important because now you're not looking at it like you did when you were applying for the job to see if you're qualified, but you're looking at it to gauge your leverage. Where do I fit in their spectrum of experience requirements, education, background, accomplishments? If you barely squeaked in there, like, wow, I can't believe it, I only had a small percentage of what they were looking for and they still chose me, that's one type of place to come from. If you have a specialized skill and they were just thrilled to have found you, and you know this and you're way more experienced in an area that's very important to them, then maybe there's some different leverage there. You're going to make sure you understand those benefits, including some intangibles, which might be, what is the actual upward mobility in this company? What kind of training are they going to give me? Is there a mentor in place? This often can't be found out that easily unless you know someone, or hopefully if you have asked some of these questions during the interview process. If you haven't, that's okay. These are things that can and should come up during the negotiating meeting. And finally, I want you to take a look at that big picture. How does this opportunity, all the aspects of it, from where it is, how many hours you're going to work, to what you're going to be doing, how does this align with who I am, what my values, my career values are, and what my actual pragmatic life looks like, and what my long-term goals are. But we're not done yet. There's more. There's also an internal checkup that needs to happen. So the subtitle to this is very important to me here, because that concept of fear that I mentioned earlier comes in a way from the idea that if I don't get this, what's going to happen? So I'd like you to hang on to the idea that, guess what? Even if this doesn't work out, you are going to land a job. I want you to hold on to that, trust in it, know that you do have options in your life and that you will get a job. So let's take your pulse about some of the things that come up often when someone gives you a job offer. How does my body feel about this? What is my gut telling me about the offer? Not all offers are right for you. And sometimes you might get the feeling that the employer is rushing you through the process. Do I trust this employer? Does this feel right? Then there's your own approach to offers. Am I running towards a finish line or being chased by wolves? And what I mean by that is this process of job search is for many people not fun. And I can imagine if you're already this far that you're in the process. And if you're interested in negotiating as a subject, you've already been in a job search of some sort or another. And most of us want it to just be over. I can tell you from experience that the job search is way harder than the job probably will ever be. So that tends to lead us to want to run to make it just end. Or maybe we're afraid, there's that fear like, oh wow, if I don't do this right, what's going to happen to me? So pay attention to that and see whether you're trying to just get it over with. And what do I want my life to look like? What are my core values? And you can ask yourself, is it okay to say no to this opportunity? By no means am I saying, even during this strange times that we live in of a pandemic, that doesn't mean you have to take any offer that comes your way. Is it okay to say yes on the spot? I'm going to encourage you to say no, but those are your decisions. So what helps with preparation is knowledge of the offer, the dynamics of the situation, the mechanics of negotiating, but understanding where you're coming from internally is equally as important. As one negotiator once said, try not to negotiate with yourself. And by that, I mean, really take a look at whether you are comfortable with your decisions, and try to arrive at a place where you can be comfortable with your choices. And step 4 is research and alignment. And I hope that you have done this already, assuming that if you're at the point of negotiating, that you have already done some of this very well. But in the final stages of research, you're going to line all this information up you've been gathering, and it might require a little bit more information. Again, location, work hours, schedule, who am I reporting to, all these details hopefully you've been finding out along the way. But there's a little bit more research you might want to do in the company, in the local economic conditions, which right now are very dynamic. Network if you can, if there's anyone in your network who is in an aligned field or even the same company, it's a great time to reach out to them. Read articles, look up the person you've been interviewing with if you haven't already done that. And lastly, very important, is to know, if you can find it, which is everywhere on the internet these days, try to research salaries based on the industry that you are interviewing for, the experience level that you are coming in with. It is not always easy to get really accurate regional data, but the internet is lovely this way. There's so many places to look. So poke around, look at Glassdoor, look at Google, look at LinkedIn, look at local Sacramento regional information and industry association surveys to come up with some kind of a range that you think is out there in the market already for what they're offering you. So with that said, I also want you to take a look at what can be negotiated. In a real situation, you're going to have already gathered all the parts of their benefits package. But I want to throw a few things out there. Just because it's not in the package doesn't mean you may not be able to bring it up either. Most people want to negotiate salary or wage, of course. As I mentioned earlier, if they don't come in at a range or a salary that you really feel fabulous about, but it's okay, this is a good time for you to try to negotiate a mid-year review. There's also flexibility, working from home. How much team support and mentorship you might get is a negotiating factor as well. Educational benefits are very popular these days, another thing you might want to bring up. But take a look at that list, and your homework after you're done here is to try to line up the top 3 most important things to you. And in this case, maybe you're preparing for a real job, but just even hypothetically, think about, wow, if I did get an offer, what would be most important? Or just pretend 3 so you can practice. Because what I'm going to ask you to do next is to pick the top 3, align them with your values, your strengths, and your accomplishments, and then prioritize them. And by alignment, I mean, if you are asking for salary range above what they're offering, there needs to be some sort of justification for why you're able to ask for that. And justification does not mean I really need the money because my rent just got raised 5%. That's definitely not where you want to go with this. You want to justify what you're asking for based on business needs. So what you could come back with is say, based on the leadership skills that I've developed when organizing this club, as well as my success in my retail job, where I increase sales by 10%, I'd like to consider this. So that's what I mean by justifying. But I'd like you to align and line up 3 things and put them 3 or 4. I'm going to ask you to stick to 3 or 4 and not go beyond that at this point. And prioritize them, meaning what is the most important thing to me and what is possibly something that I might be willing to give in on. So understanding the dynamics of the situation will help you once you get into the meeting, but you need to have that prioritization in place first for yourself. So this picture is really just about coming back to that win-win concept. You've done your homework now, and before you go back to that meeting, it's important to also just spend a few minutes thinking about the dynamics of the situation. In general terms, as I mentioned before, both you and the employer have your own needs and your wants and your own stresses. The more you can focus on what you know about what's important to them, the more other-centered you are. It will reduce your own stress in the situation, and it will improve your ability to relate to them, and it will help you to align your skills, your values, and your goals with what their needs are. On their side, they are also gauging your value to them. Both of you are considering trust in this picture. And that is part of the dynamics as well. If you already knew the person or they're in your network, the level of trust is higher. If you're total strangers and the only meetings you've had have been 2 Zoom meetings, which is very possible these days, and there's no other connection, there's more work that needs to be done to build trust. So gauging that level of trust is part of the dynamics. Understanding the level of risk for you and for the employer in this dynamic is also important. That's why it's easier often to negotiate when you're already employed rather than when you're unemployed, because you feel like there's more risk because you might really need that job. And they may have a different level of risk as well if the previous hire had not worked out well, or if they're under a tremendous amount of pressure. So both parties are gauging leverage, but hopefully it is a collaborative approach. And if you go in considering their wants and needs, this will really help you along the way. I'd like to talk just a little bit more about some of the undermining principles of this whole thing. So while you're doing this meeting and you're really thinking about the other person and you're trying to be collaborative, there are some basic social principles that are happening that are embedded within this type of conversation. There's the concept of reciprocity. And as you can see, it's the idea of give and take. And I think most everyone thinks of that when you think of the term negotiating. It's a very important part of the process, which is why I said when you align and put your top 3 negotiating items at the table, there need to be something in there where you're willing to give. Because this is not a situation where you go in and you say, these are my 3 demands, but rather a conversation where there's some give and take. There is also the concept of scarcity, which might surprise some of you, but this is a very basic concept. It's in all sales. We all get it all day long. Only 20, I'm laughing because I'm thinking of what is going on now and during our pandemic, where scarcity became a mindset for people, and very soon we ran out of hand sanitizers, right? But it happens in daily life when we're not in pandemics as well. The idea in sales is used often, limited time offers, things like that. In a negotiating meeting, scarcity really comes down to how important and how hard it is to find the skill set, the knowledge, the abilities that you have. As you continue on in your career and you mature, scarcity will become more evident. But I do want you to hold on to one basic idea, and that is that there is only one you. And so with that sense, I'm going to move over to authority as a concept. And authority, I don't mean the employer is in charge, they have all the authority over you, but more the idea that when you enter into a negotiating conversation, you need to do so with authority. Again, we're trying to push away that concept of fear, and one of the ways you do it is understanding where your authority is. And where you are master is of yourself. You know yourself, you know your skills, you know your interest level in this position and your enthusiasm. And I want you to hang on to those and deliver those with authority. So when you're going to ask for salary, for instance, and we talked about justification, you're going to ask for that, but you're going to deliver the why with authority. Because I have this skill, because I have shown such enthusiasm and built such a following of clients through that. Hopefully that makes sense. Consistency is another important influence piece of the puzzle. I mentioned earlier trust, and trust is part of where the concept of consistency comes from. Nobody likes surprises in this process. You are getting to know someone that you're going to spend maybe a lot of time with. It's a big commitment on your side. It's also a commitment on theirs. Hopefully you've gotten this far, which means you've been consistent in your style and showing your personality and being professional throughout all your communications, and that continues here. And consistency is one of the reasons why I'm going to talk about how to deliver your asks in a very particular way. In the middle, there is liking, which can't be understated enough. People rarely hire someone they don't like, and having a congenial experience is part of the whole process. And when you go back to this negotiating meeting, this is a happy time. And as nervous as you might feel going into the meeting, hold on again to that win-win scenario concept, to the idea that they do want you. You both want the same thing, and let yourself be a giving person in that environment. And finally, consensus, because that's the end of a successful negotiation, is when two parties come to agreement on something. So I'm going to appeal to you to approach this this negotiating meeting in an organized fashion. I asked you to prioritize them, stay focused on that outcome, and you're going to deliver them in a particular order. To put a little visual to what this meeting looks like from a conceptual standpoint, you are making that happy sandwich. You're starting a meeting with positivity, with liking. You're negotiating, you're having a reciprocal conversation about give and take on some of the pieces of the offer. You are justifying the things you're asking for with authority and with real business reasons. And at the end of the day, you're going into the meeting with the approach of closing with consensus. So there's a basic structure to this. And it's not anything to stay away from. You can walk through this, keep it positive, stay true to yourself, and think about it as a collaborative meeting. So, some nuts and bolts just to go over it. Before the meeting again, know the offer, know yourself, know the company and the industry, research all of this, understand where you are on that scarcity scale, and get your ducks in a row so that you can deliver this in an organized fashion so that they can, again, feel comfortable with you in the process. But during the meeting, much like you did on the phone when they gave you an offer, start with thanking them. And I'm going to bring up front that this meeting, you're actually going to start because you asked for the meeting most likely, correct? We were on the phone, they gave you an offer, you said would it be okay if we meet later. So this meeting actually it should start with you. So you're going to begin the conversation once again by thanking them and restating your enthusiasm and interest in the opportunity. You don't need to go crazy here, but certainly don't hold back your enthusiasm. A lot of people lose the ability to communicate enthusiasm when they're nervous. And so I'm going to encourage you to try to let that one go, and it's okay to be excited. Then I'm going to encourage you to give all those negotiable items that you decided on up front. This has to do with consistency. So thank you so much for the opportunity to meet today. I gave it a great deal of thought. I'm really excited about the opportunity. I feel like I'm a great fit for it. There were 3 things that I would hope to discuss with you today so that we can create a good step forward. You're then going to talk about, I'm going to encourage you to talk about your most important negotiating item first. There's a lot of different viewpoints on this. This is just coming from me, but I think it's best to start with what's most important to you. But remember, don't have that be your only thing. So most of the time, you're going to talk about money up front first. And then when the meeting is over, I'll show you a few more examples of what that middle part looks like. But when the meeting is over, the more positively you close the meeting, the better. Remember, again, you both want the same thing. Maybe the opportunity isn't the right fit for you, or it came at the wrong time. That's okay too. It's still important to end the meeting in a positive way. This person could still become part of your professional network as well. And I've heard it all the time. Maybe down the road, there's a different opportunity, or that person moves on to a different company and you end up working for them. It's a small world. So regardless of the outcome, always keep things positive, always keep things professional. And when you get an offer, always get it in writing. So here's some scenarios just to give you a few things to work on or think about with money in particular. Somebody early on in the interview process may have already asked you what salary you're looking for. So here's some tips on that process. If somebody does that for you, we're in the state of California where it's actually now become illegal to ask about previous salaries on job applications. So hopefully you won't see as much of this, but you still could. So it's kind of like playing a tennis match here. They throw the ball at you. I'd like you to think about throwing it back. You might say something like, I prefer to hold off on this part of the discussion until later in our process. Is that all right with you? I'd like to hear more about, see how I've redirected the conversation there. Or, I'd like to learn more about the expectations and scope of work first so I can give an informed answer to your question. Can you tell me more about? Or just flat out, you could ask them, do you have a salary range in mind for this position? I'd be interested to know what the company's budget range is. Okay, so that's before the negotiating meeting. Hopefully you haven't had to deal with this yet, but sometimes push does come to shove and you have to give a number out. But usually they've already given you the offer, you've gone home and you've stewed over it, now you're coming back. So you could come back and say, in my research for this position, I found the average salary to be X, which is lower than what the offer was. Can you explain the difference? Or you could say, I'm really excited about the possibility of working for X company and really appreciate the offer. The salary for this role did come in lower than I'd expected. When it is time to give your salary ask, though, be sure to be ready to justify. At my previous position, I was able to continuously bring new clients, which led the organization to give me X amount raise. I hope to continue this success here and would like to start at X salary. Or based on my research with comparable jobs in the industry, I was thinking this position would come in between X and Y. A range is fine, but don't make it too wide. Have other options ready as well. When I mentioned before, you can end by saying, this salary is a little lower than I had expected. And here's a place where in the negotiating process, silence is actually a very powerful thing. If you can do it, then wait. Because sometimes in that quiet, the person across the table may jump in with a counter offer. If not, though, you need to have alternative ideas for sweetening the pot on your end, such as maybe requesting that 6-month review or talking about some other items on your negotiating list. Do you think company X might have some flexibility when it comes to? And just a side note here, notice I'm using company X and not the term you. I think it's very helpful to depersonalize this conversation. So when you're asking, you're not asking that individual across the table from you, you're asking the company. It's easier for the other person when it's delivered this way. So those are some nuts and bolts and some tips about what is actually a fairly complex, but very important part of sealing the deal on your job search. So here are some resources for you. The Career Center, now open virtually. Please take an opportunity to do a one-on-one with Career Center staff to either talk about this more or to maybe even do a mock interview process or a mock negotiating session with a staff member. We're always happy to do it. We do have this really great tool online called Big Interview as well, which you can all access. On that platform, you can practice interviewing, you can record yourself, but it also has 11 full video lessons on negotiating. I have not watched all of them, I will admit, but I've watched enough of them and we're close enough. You'll see a lot of different opinions on this subject matter. At the end of the day, you have to decide what you're comfortable with, but the more you learn about it, the more you practice it, the better you will be in terms of your comfort level. And last but not least, we have Handshake, which hopefully you're all familiar with, where the jobs and internships are posted. We offer virtual career fairs, webinars, and more. There's also, though, is a platform for you to research salaries, because you can look at what jobs are up there right now and what they're paying. So use that as another research tool for yourself. And then finally, of course, there's the Financial Wellness Center that has lots of tools and tips and things for you to help you with your financial wellness, and negotiation was part of this, because as I showed you on that page with the math, even little increments can help secure your financial wellness as you go through your life. So thank you so much for joining me today, and hopefully we will see you at the Financial Wellness Center or at the Career Center, for now, virtually. Thank you.